gospel, jazz rock, jazz blues. Um, so, we're interested in jazz, and we've had on some phenomenal jazz artists who really are from many different perspectives on, how they came to jazz and where they see jazz fitting into the music of today. So, last week we had on an interesting vocalist. He does backgrounds, and he's done backgrounds for almost every great talented vocalist you can imagine. So we always bring you something different. And tonight I have somebody who you're really going to love. I've been enamored with her career for some time now. She's still a very young, wonderful virtuoso. She brings her own unique version of jazz, which is rooted both in the old and the new. Her sound can be very soothing, and it can also, have some really rough, really progressive rock and progressive jazz and blues edges on it sometimes. And she also has tried to reimagine folk music, and a lot of her music is really rooted in the mid-century in soul and jazz, and and I think she brings a unique perspective. I see her as one of the young lions of jazz. There's a whole groundswell, particularly in the UK, of a lot of artists now who are young who are incorporating jazz into hip hop and jazz into R&B. And I think she is one of these leaders, in resurrecting jazz. Her name is Cecily, and I want everybody to welcome to our show, to welcome Cecily now. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I appreciate it.
Well, it's well deserved. And again, I think, when I think of your music, you and I chatted a few minutes before the show started, and I mentioned to you one of my all-time favorite vocalists, Minnie Riperton. And I mentioned her because she had a tremendous high range and also a very unique style. And I think you have that gift. It's a gift. Not only the vocal range that you have, but also how you think about music. And I want you to share more of that with people and the listeners we have tonight. We already have over 40,000 people already plugged in listening to you. So, excuse me. So, the first thing I like to do is to ask you, so you can let everybody know at the top of the show, what's cooking? What do you have? What events are coming up? What recordings, new releases?
Yeah, so I put out an album a few years ago called Awakening Part 1, and I'm done recording Awakening Part 2, which I'm really looking forward to putting out because these songs have been living with me for quite a while now. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the world experiencing them and incorporating this music into their lives. So I'm going to be putting out the single in October, and then releasing the full album next spring, or maybe around my birthday, which is in March. We'll see. I'm still figuring out the exact dates, but excited to put the single out and hopefully do some tour dates around that release date as well. Working on booking some of those things now. But I live in Washington, D.C. area. So if anyone is in the D.C. area, I'll be at a venue called The Pie Shop, which is on H Street, on November 11th. So in a couple of months. And I'll be sharing the stage or sharing the bill with the artist from Nashville, whose name is Alana Royale, who's a beautiful soul singer. So I think that'll be a nice little pairing. So if you're in the DC area, come out on November 11th. And backtracking in time a little bit, on September 23rd, I will be singing in Manhattan at Battery City Park.
Yes.
Um, Around 5 p.m., I think, is when I go on. So me and my band will be in the park. It's a free show by the river. Should be really lovely. So that's on Saturday, September 23rd. And then the closest date I have is next Saturday, September 9th. I'll be performing at the Chestertown Jazz Festival. Chestertown is on the eastern shore of Maryland. So anyone who lives in the eastern shore, come out and see me September 9th at the Chestertown Jazz Festival.
Wonderful. Do you know anything about Battery Park?
I do. I know a little bit, but I feel like you're gonna tell me more.
Well, I'm from New York, so you're going to be right near the Statue of Liberty. You'll have a beautiful night view. You know, it's a lovely place at night to have a concert. I
Yeah,
think you'll enjoy it a lot. So,
thank
all
you.
right. What I want to talk about a little bit with you today, I always like to give people some background. For example, when did the music bug really catch you? And when did you do your first recitals and your first, the first time you stood up in front of people and sang? And a little bit about your family background. I know that you had a musical family, so why don't you tell people about music in your house?
So I'm the youngest of four, and so I was always listening to older people's music all the time, which I think was the best thing to do. So my dad was a huge jazz lover. His favorite artist is Miles Davis, um, which is why my brother's name is Miles. That's how much he loved Miles Davis. So I grew up listening to a good amount of, Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Stanley Cowell and Ahmad Jamal and things like that. That's what I grew up listening to with my dad. And then my mom was really a child of Motown. She's from Harlem, New York, but she grew up on Motown, specifically Smokey Robinson. She loves Smokey Robinson. And then what they had in common, my mom and my dad, is that they both listened to a lot of 70s soul music. So Minnie Riperton and the Isley Brothers and Earth, Wind and Fire, Stevie Wonder, the list goes on and on. So I heard a lot of that growing up, specifically a lot of 60s and 70s soul and jazz. And then my older siblings, they were much older than me. My closest sibling, my brother Miles, is 10 years older than me.
Wow.
So they were always listening to, other kinds of stuff. Like my sister loves a lot of 80s vocalists. She loves Phyllis Hyman and Tina Marie. And then my brother was listening to a lot of hip hop. He listened to like a lot of 90s hip hop. And so there was always different things going on, musically in my house. And we played a lot of music around the house as well. And then when I got old enough to really start listening to music on my own, I mean, I was listening to the music that was current as well. So I was listening to like Ashanti and Beyonce and people like that. But I really used to dig into my mom's music collection a lot. This was like the beginning of iTunes. So I would go in her office in our house and I would listen to she had uploaded like all her CDs into iTunes. And so I would sit there and I would just listen to all her music. I would listen to a lot of Phyllis Hyman, a lot of Gil Scott-Heron, a lot of Minnie Riperton, a lot of Luther Vandross,
Oh,
and I was also a huge fan of 90s R&B because that's kind of like what I heard a lot growing up. Is I was born in 1990, so I heard a lot of that growing up. So I love Faith Evans and Mary J. Blige and SWV and Brandy. So it's a lot of music I grew up listening to, but I can solidly say like it's all soul, like when you come down to it, a lot of what I was listening to is soul based music, even a lot of that like 2000s R&B. Like it's very poppy, but when you get down to it, black music, it's soul and it's blues, so I think that was the influences. That was a lot, but yeah.
yeah. What's really interesting to me is, you had so many different types of music, different genres, and different periods in your household. And and the music industry, the technology began to change the music too. By the time the 1990s rolls around, and when you're still a child, um, they were starting to be able to loop music, which loop the chords, and you couldn't do that before. So that
Mhm.
opened up the door for hip hop and for house music. And a
Mhm.
lot of changes in the music, which weren't necessarily rooted in the culture, but rooted in the technology and the limits of technology. I want to talk with you about that a little bit later because your style is very, I use the word traditional, okay, and I use that in a positive way. I don't mean it's not current, which it is. It has a very current sound,
Mhm.
but it's traditional in the sense that it's the orchestration in your music that I really love. Part of what, when you talk about soul and that kind of classic period, the instrumentation was really important, and
Yeah.
it wasn't dominated just by a heavy beat, and it wasn't syncopation; it was orchestration.
Mm.
And that's what you represent. And I think a lot of young people your age are looking for orchestration. I think, I've noticed it in so many festivals that young people are showing up for now. So I don't want to take time talking. I want you to talk, but I think you represent this important link to the more traditional forms of music that I think is being resurrected again today. So when did you first start singing? Tell me about that. Tell everyone.
So I used to sing in my youth choir at church when I was maybe 10 and 11. But I wasn't a star. I wasn't out there doing solos. I was, standing in the second row in the alto section. Um, but I really liked singing, and I used to sing to myself a lot at home. But I would get really nervous if I knew that people could hear me or were listening. Um, but I just love the way that the vibration of my voice felt, like, kinda moving through my body. That I always say that was my first connection to singing, was just feeling that, just it made me feel healed, it made me feel alive, it made me feel free
Yeah.
to sing, even when I was just doing it for myself. And so I saw a flyer in our, local, like, arts center, like, community arts center for voice lessons, and I asked my mom if I could take voice lessons, and her reaction was, "Well, can you sing? 'Cause you" Which I have to say I think is unfair, because if someone asks to take piano, you don't ask them if they already know how to play piano, you
Exactly.
know? But we have
Exactly.
different rules for voice. Everyone thinks you have to have some natural talent going into it, which you can't. As a voice teacher now myself, I can say that does help, but it's not mandatory. Anyone can take voice lessons. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
So I did. I told her, yes, I can sing. And she said, well, you have to sing something for me if you want me to pay for voice lessons. And so I did. I stood in the kitchen and I sang. I don't know why, but I sang Lift Every Voice and Sing. Because that's the song. I guess I knew it well enough because we always sang it in church and different events and stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna sing Lift Every Voice and Sing. And she was like, okay, you can take voice lessons. And that was the beginning of it. I was 12, I think, when I started voice lessons. And there was a time when if you wanted to take voice lessons, it had to be classical. There wasn't many other options. And so I took classical voice, and it was a great experience. I took classical voice from the age of 12 till all through college, so up until 22, I guess. So about 10 years of classical voice training. And it really taught me a lot, on not only about breathing and shaping the sound and all of that, but it taught me a lot about emoting. My teacher, her name is Alina Kazinska. She was really wonderful because she really delved into the text of the song as poetry, and that you had to be a storyteller. And so that's something I really carried with me. One time I did a summer intensive with her where we took voice and we took piano and we took music theory, and we also did acting classes. So she was really big on, you have to embody the song and you have to be the storyteller. And I think in addition to the breathing and the support and the shaping and all that stuff, like the technical stuff, I think that's what I've carried with me the most, is the importance of storytelling as a singer.
That's interesting. One of the people I had on the show a while ago, Mickey Howard.
Yes.
Yeah, Mickey's wonderful. And I went to see her live a few times, and when I asked her, what's important to you, the music or the lyrics? What's more important in terms of how you approach a song? And she said the lyrics, and she said that I have to think through the words. It's not just the measures. I have to think through the words and know how I want to bend a note with my voice. I mean, it's a craft. When you're really trained that way, you know, it you approach the words in the music differently than another artist does. And that's what makes, I think, some artists just stand out from others. It's how they interpret the words, the lyrics, in the emotional content. That's what she meant by bending words. It's, how
Mhm.
long, anybody, it's like Miles Davis once said, anybody can play a note. It's how you play it that's important. And it's the
Mhm.
same thing with a vocalist. Anybody can sing a word or a lyric, but how you sing the word is what's important. So, I
Yeah.
think having that classical training, I think was really, I mean, it's irreplaceable.
Mm.
Yeah. So, okay. So tell me now a little bit more about, so now we kind of went through, did you play any instruments in public school or?
I did not really. I took some piano lessons as a child, but once I found singing, I wasn't really interested in piano anymore. And I remember this very specifically at the age of 12. I was telling my uncle this, like, at a family dinner, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm taking voice lessons now, I'm not doing piano anymore," and he was like, "You stopped taking piano? Don't you wanna be Alicia Keys?" Because Alicia Keys was, like, really big in that moment. And I sat there and I thought, "Well, maybe he does have a point, maybe I should keep taking piano." I kinda wish I had kept taking piano, but I've realized over time that, like, for me, singing is really about being connected to my body, and that helps me kind of emote, like I was saying before. And something about playing an instrument that's outside of my body just doesn't have the same appeal somehow. It doesn't feel as personal. It doesn't feel like I have as much to say on a different instrument. I can play some chords and things, but I'm not really that good. I don't really play that well. I went to Catholic school for high school, and so they had a really, really great choral program, which was a blessing, and one of the reasons I ended up going there too. And so I was in the gospel choir at school, and I was also in the classical choirs. They had like 3 different ones, and that was really great training. My first couple years of being in the chorus at my high school, I was a alto 2. It was an all girls school, so that was the lowest voice part.
Oh,
I was an alto 2, and the
good.
alto 2 section was not that big. There was only a few of us, and we really love holding down our parts because we always got to sing, like, the cool harmonies and stuff, and we felt cool because we got to sing the lowest part. And then my, voice teacher found out that I was singing alto 2 in choir, and she told me, "You are a soprano. What are you doing singing alto 2? You need to be singing soprano." And so she literally emailed my choir director, and the next time I showed up, I sang alto 2 for about 2 years in the choir. It was a long time until she found out, but when she found out, I was moved to soprano 1. So I went from singing that lowest part to the highest part.
Nice, fun.
Um, and even though I think being alto made my ears stronger in terms of being able to hear harmonies and things like that, I think being a soprano, definitely singing soprano in choir made my high notes much stronger just because I was doing it more often. So it was a good training. And then once I went to college, I was still in the choirs. I was in the gospel choir and I was in the classical chorus. And I was in like 2 different a cappella groups. I was doing a lot of singing. Music was not my major, but somehow, if you looked at my extracurriculars, you would have thought that it was because that was all I was doing. Um, but it was a great, great training. Being an a cappella is a great training because you're
Mhm.
just relying on your ear. You learn a lot about blending, and it's been a good journey. I'm really happy with. I'm just really blessed, I should say, that I had all those different and varying experiences because they taught me a lot about the different ways to use my voice. And I'll say it wasn't really until college when I started to think about myself as a soloist more. I was singing solos and things like that in high school, but it was mainly classical music. And it wasn't until I got in college and I realized, okay, maybe I was about halfway through college when I realized, okay, maybe I do want to be a singer, like as a career. And so I started to take more seriously, like trying to write my own music, um, trying to do more solos in my a cappella groups and gospel choir and all of that, just to get more comfortable with it. And then I started performing at other colleges, for events and things. And people on my campus would invite me to sing for special events and fundraisers and things like that. So, and I had a few mentors at college, like, that were really helpful. So it was even though I didn't major in music or voice, I feel like I had a really good kind of incubation space for finding myself as an artist and as a singer in college.
Listening to your music that I've heard, I would never think of you as a contralto. You know, it just doesn't seem to fit the music. But you have at least a 3 octave range. You have tremendous range.
I
And
do.
yeah,
Yeah, I think let's see, one, two. It's just at 4 octaves.
yeah, that's what I said. Three, high three, four. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
just at 4 octaves on a good day.
yeah, yeah. This is something else. How do you prepare before you sing? How do you take care of your voice? What do you do?
That's a great question. I'll say if it's something really important, like a studio day or a big performance, I'm pretty stringent about how I prepare. So I make sure I'm drinking a ton of water in the days leading up to the show. I always try to get a good amount of sleep the night before the show, like sleep well. Uh, I don't eat too late at night the night before. I'm careful about what kind of foods I eat the day before and the day of. Nothing too spicy or too acidic, just to avoid like acid reflux and things like that kind of playing a part. Um, and then the day of the show, I always work out, either do some cardio or some yoga, something to get my body warm and get my breath moving. And again, more water, 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 water. And then the day of the show, I mean, in terms of preparing, I always warm up. Depending on how long the performance is, I'll warm up for about 15 to 30 minutes, just enough to get my voice warmed up and not enough to overdo it.
Right.
So those are like the most important things: water, sleep, movement, and warming up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, every artist has a ritual. I know one of the people I had on the show. She told me that she uses vocal ease.
Hmm.
Yeah, she said that that she pops a dozen of those with a couple of hours before the show, and she said it anesthetizes her vocal cords. It relaxes them. So everyone has a different way of approaching preparation. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but diet is key, and protecting your voice. I mean, you look at some of the artists that have been out there for years. You know, Tony Bennett, up to the day he passed away, his voice was incredible.
Yeah.
And you wonder how they do this, preserve their voice all that time. So, that's an important part of this. Look, I want to play one of your songs for everybody. One of the songs I really love is "Clumsy." So, why don't you tell everybody the backstory on "Clumsy" before I play it?
So Clumsy is a song from my most current project called Awakening Part 1. And this project is all about exploring unconditional love. And it was inspired by a few different books that I read about unconditional love. And this song in particular is inspired by a quote from a book called How to Love, which was written by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a or was a Zen Buddhist teacher and writer. And there was a couple quotes he had, but the one I kind of pulled from the most was he said, "If you don't know how to love, you will wound the person that you love." Um, and so I thought that that was a really interesting concept that I could connect to my own life experience and kind of put in the song. And so this song is about when you want to love someone, when you want to be in a relationship, but you realize you have a lot of healing to do and maybe you're just not ready for that yet. So this is Clumsy.
Terrific. Are you familiar with the book, The Five Love Languages?
I am, yes.
Yeah, yeah. That talks about other directed love, about
Mhm.
understanding how other people want to be loved, not how you want to love them.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So yeah, it's great that you've been reading that kind of work, because that's the kind of stuff that, again, I don't think fans realize. where inspiration and preparation come from. And you've been giving everybody some good insights. So let's play Clumsy, and then if maybe you can comment on it afterwards, if you want to say a few more words. But I love this song, so here we go.
I don't love myself the way I should.
Beautiful. That's very beautiful. A few questions about the song. Um, when you go to write a song, do you have a, a rhythm in your mind, or do you start with lyrics, or how do you approach something like this?
Yeah, well, firstly, I just want to give a quick shout out to the co-writers of that song. Malik Hunter is a co-writer who you hear playing bass, and also Drew Kidd, who you hear on the keys, and also did the string arrangements. I'm sorry, not the string, the horn arrangements on that song. And they made it so beautiful. So I just want to give a shout out to them. Usually, like I said, I don't play very much. So usually what I come with is, for me personally, typically melody and lyrics come at the same time. I know some people start with melody, some people start with lyrics.
Right.
For me, they usually come together. And so for this particular song, like I said, I was reading over the quotes in that book, How to Love, and I started to get kind of an idea. And so I recorded the kind of first verse that I had, and with the melody and the lyrics, and then I took it to Drew and Malik, and we kind of started to build the song around it. So I kind of came with melody and lyrics, and then Drew started to kind of build chords around it. Malik started to get the bass line down, and then the song just kind of evolved from there. Um, and it was like a process. It wasn't like we did it all at once. We probably from idea to completion was about a year or 9
Mhm.
months on that song. Um, and that was with us meeting, maybe 5 times or something over that 9-month period, and kind of figuring out, where should this go? Because it was like once we kinda had, after 1 or 2 sessions, we kinda had like the verses and the chorus down, and it was like, well, where should the bridge go? And sometimes that takes a while, and we decided we wanted it to be really simple, more open. And so that kind of, and then near the end of working on the song, like a week before we were going to record it, Drew said, you know what, I think we should do a reprise at the end. I think we should come back to the verse, and I'll kind of reharmonize the chords underneath to like really kind of solidify the message of the song. Since you're calling it Clumsy, I feel like we should come back to that lyric. And I was like, yeah, I love that idea. So some songs happen really quickly, and sometimes things need time to kind of develop. So that's how that one came together.
Yeah, it's great. That you're writing in a team. One of the things that has been occurring more and more these days is that songwriting is becoming a lost art. It's being done by techies, who use computers to imagine the chorus and the hook, and they base it on, it's an algorithm, and
Mm,
it's not human intervention. And Cheryl Crow has been very vocal about this, that
mm,
she thinks that songwriting is just a dying art because of technology. And yet we're hearing so much about technology with the artist strike and the writer's strike, and technology has a place, but it shouldn't dominate. And what's really nice about the way you just explained it is it's a human process, and
mm,
sometimes it comes together right away, and sometimes it takes 9 months to a year. And but that's what songwriting's always been about, and that's what creates the emotional content to the song. It's not rushed, it's not automated, it's soulful. And
mm.
so it's just nice the way you describe that. So tell me a little bit more about, I know that you ended up you graduated with a degree in political science and Black history, I believe it was, if I remember correctly. And
Mhm.
you know, and you one day you just kind of walked out of your class and decided you're going to be a full-time entertainer. I mean, how did that happen? I mean, I know you became disillusioned. I read this somewhere that you became disillusioned. Why don't you talk about the disillusionment a little bit, about what changed you? Because that's what really led to your career. So it's a good thing, actually.
Yeah, I think, from the time I was, like, 13, I 12 or 13, I really wanted to work in international relations or diplomacy, that type of world. Like, it honestly happened around the same time I found singing. I took a class in my 8th grade in 8th grade. It was a geography class, but we did a lot around, like, development, like, international development, and I don't know, I just found it really fascinating, and so from that point forward, my dream was, I wanna work for the United Nations. Like, that's what I had wanted to do from the age of 13. And like I told you, I was doing all this singing and all the choirs and taking voice lessons and doing the all-state competitions and all this stuff, the whole way through. But I was really focused on like, okay, I'm gonna work for the United Nations or I wanna work for one of these international NGOs or that type of thing. And so I went to college with that in mind. I majored in political science. I went through like 4 different minors. At first, I was minoring in French, and then I realized because 'cause I've been taking French, like, most of my life, and then I realized, like, college level French was very hard. And then I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna be a peace and conflict studies minor," because that was another thing I really liked about the school I went to, they have peace and conflict studies. Um, and I surprisingly found that very interesting, but a little bit boring. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna be a public policy minor, because that's, really related to what I want to do. And then I had to take a whole bunch of econ classes, and the second one kicked my ass. I don't know if I can curse. I don't know if that's a curse word, but it kicked my ass. It
That's
kicked my
fine.
butt.
Don't.
So and I was like, yo, forget these econ classes, forget this public policy. And finally, I settled on, uh, at my school, they call it Black Studies. Some places call it Africana Studies or, whatever you want to call it. And that just fit for me. And I realized that just learning more about Black history, like when I took my Intro to Black Studies class, it just felt like home. And I loved it so much. And I just found a lot of joy moving through my Black studies classes, uh, especially even getting to write about music. I wrote a lot about like music history and stuff like that. And so I honestly realized my junior year that I really should have been a Black studies major, but I had already committed to this poli sci thing. But I started to realize with the international development work, and the more I learned about the history of the United Nations and all these, and the IMF and all these places, that they were just guessing. Everyone was guessing and kind of playing with people's lives, and it started to make me feel really uncomfortable. And I don't want to shame or anyone who's doing that work, because I think it's important work. But I just realized for me, what I had always wanted to do was help people. That's what I felt drawn to do, like, in the world. I was like, that's why I felt drawn to the work, was I wanna be able to help people. That's why I wanted to learn French and study, international relations so that I could work in French speaking, African countries and do good work. And I just realized that a lot of the work I thought was good work, turned out to be harmful in the end, or turned out to not be as helpful. And I also just started learning more about the history of development work and its ties to colonialism and imperialism and this idea of neo-colonialism and all of that. I'm not gonna get into the weeds too much on it, but I just started to realize that, like, that work didn't feel right in my spirit. Um, and so I decided, you know what? I think I wanna do music as a career. And I just one day I just decided, like, yeah, that's gonna be it. I know I can't do this anymore. I've always been the type of person where if it doesn't feel right, I can't do it. Like, I'm just very gut intuition driven. Even if things look great on the surface, if it doesn't feel right inside, I can't do it. And that's what I realized with my degree, is that, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and finish my political science degree because I still find all this stuff really interesting. But this is not what I want to do with my life. And there have been times when I almost doubted that, like, darn, maybe I should have went and got that master's degree in, foreign service work or something. Because this music thing. It's so tough. There's really no guarantees with the career that I chose. But yeah, there just came a moment when I realized, you know what? If I really want to help people, I can do that with music. Like
Mhm.
music has helped me in my life. Like music has made me who I am in so many ways. Like I can do that with music. And I think that's why I approach my work the way that I do, trying to, like, I was reading all these books about love and I was learning so much. And I realized, man, I really want to share this with people. Let me make some albums about it. So that's always kind of been my impetus, is like I want to help people with my music. And I don't want it to be preachy, but I want it to have a message. I want it to have something that comforts you and also something that maybe shakes you up a little bit, makes you have to rethink how you're going about your day. Because I really see music as I don't, people have different connections to this word, but I think of music as spells. Whatever you're playing over your life enough, whatever words or messages you're bringing into your day over and over and over again, it's helping to create your reality. So
Mhm.
I want to give people music that helps them to create the reality that they want, that's going to really elevate us as a human family. So that was a long answer.
No, it's a great answer because you actually ended up doing the kind of work that that underlied your interest in international relations. It's the humanity that you are interested in, and you found the common purpose in music. And it's true. And that's why people listen to music they want to hear, and that could be good and bad. And when a new artist takes music in a different direction, that's why it's so important, because it's allowing people to experience something that they didn't even know they wanted to experience.
Hmm.
And music, that's why music's so important. And you're absolutely right, it takes people into different places, and it has meaning in their lives, and it's vital. So you still are doing the same kind of work, you're just doing it in a different place. That's
Hmm.
really, that's
Exactly.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, that's really what it comes down to. So, I'll only play another one of your songs, and then we can talk a little bit more um, about the joy of music. This is something I read that you had talked about, and I wanted to kind of let people understand this part of you a little bit more. But I want to play "No Room for Fear." So, why don't you tell everybody a few words about that, and we can talk about it afterwards again.
Yeah, so No Room for Fear is another song from Awakening Part 1 that I co-wrote with Drew Kidd and Malik Hunter. And this song started off as just an idea I had one day. I was actually backstage at another performance, and like I said, the music and the lyrics just started coming to me. And so I made a little voice memo, and then me and Malik and Drew started working on it, and it grew into this beautiful song. And my influences on this one were Anita Baker, because I think she's one of the greatest love songwriters of our time. And so I really tried to pull from her. And also, oh my goodness, why am I forgetting the actual group's name? The song Love Ballad.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
I know. Yeah, I know. I
yes,
can't
yes,
think of it either. Yeah.
yes, yes. So those two songs. So hopefully when you listen, you can hear some of those influences.
Yeah. Before we play, I just want to say one of the things I hear in a lot of your music, and you mentioned her a couple of times, is Phyllis Hyman. And I want to come back to that maybe and talk to you a little bit more about Phyllis Hyman, because
Mm.
she represents kind of the other side, the sadness a lot of times, of life. So we can talk about that some more too. But let me play "No Room for Fear." Okay.
Saw you strolling from afar. Dip, the glide, the bounce. Then your smile lifted high. To cradle every ounce of me caught up in worry of what has yet to be. deal with me, so I don't slow down. Rather you and me, 'cause I know I love you in a place that can't be moved. I know that it's sincere, 'cause you have nothing to prove. So I let go of control and fall into what's meant to be. There's no room for me when you're loving me. Oh, yeah. Oh, baby. No, 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 no. You got me feeling so free. You love me free, oh. And I need you right here with me. Yeah. Oh, my baby, I just so gotta let you know, gotta let you know. My baby, baby,
Great song. Love it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's really wonderful. I'm curious, when you finish the song in the studio, do you have the studio engineer or your music director do the final mix and mastering, or do you use an outside source for that?
I use an outside mixer and master engineer. His name is Dave Darlington, and he lives in New York, actually. So after everything's done, I travel up to New York with my little hard drive, and we get to work on that part of it.
Yeah, 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 that's terrific because I've had this discussion with a lot of artists, and it's always occurred to me when it comes to the final mixing and mastering, especially commercial purposes, you can't use the same people who wrote the song and did the music because they're too close to it. You need to have another
Mhm,
set of ears who see it from a whole different perspective. And that's I just want people to be aware, people listening in, that this is a very, very long and complex process to get the final track ready for commercial use, people to hear.
mhm,
I mean, here you have to take your little hard drive and take a trip up to New York. So it's always something. You perform with so many phenomenal people in different genres on stage. You've been on, you opened for Gregory Porter and for Mesa, jazz and soul artists. You've also opened for R&B artists and stars Johnny Gill, Kenny Lattimore. Um, you've also done open for folk artists too, Becca Stevens, and also alternative soul pioneers like Bilal. So, how do you get connected with all this different genres of music that you open for? And, I mean, that's a lot of range.
Well, I think that naturally my music kind of falls in that. I think of it as a beautiful synergy of soul and jazz and a little bit of folk. Um, Usually, honestly, it's the venues that connect me in some way in DC because they know of me. So, as an artist coming in town, they want some support, then the venue usually calls me. But here and there, it's the artist. Like, For instance, I opened for Jose James in DC a few years ago. I guess it was 2019 because it was a year before the pandemic. And his bass player is from DC and knows me, so asked me to do it. And that turned into a lovely relationship as well because then Jose James asked me to feature on his next album. No Beginning, No End 2. So that came out in, I want to say 2020. So, it's never easy opening for other artists because most of the time you are not the person that the audience came to see. And a lot of people are like just waiting for the person they came to see to come on the stage. But I take it as a really nice challenge to win over new audiences. So I always pay a lot of attention to like the opening song. I have a rule. Majority of the time when I come out on stage, I never talk first. I'm always going to sing before I speak because I want the first thing that kind of pulls you in to be the sound of my voice. I want that to be what you connect with, you know? So I always come on stage, I let the band play a little bit and then I come on and I sing, and I usually do at least one, sometimes two songs before I speak because I want people to feel connected to me before they listen to what I have to say, because if you're not in the music, you're not going to remember anything I said anyway. If I speak right at the top of the show, you're not going to remember it because it doesn't mean anything to you yet. So I think opening for artists is a good experience, not only to gain new fans, but just to, figure out how to capture people's attention. Yeah, so I'm really, really blessed to be able to open for so many amazing artists who come through DC.
Yeah, a lot of the venues you played at have been really spectacular. You play Blues Alley and you play the Hamilton. Have you played Birchmere? Have you done that yet?
I have not actually, and I do love the Birchmere. I need to figure that out. I'd love to go there.
We should talk. Yeah, there's also some great places in Baltimore, like the Keystone. And that has a long history. And this is
Yeah,
this is
it
a great area.
it is. I was gonna say, if you're tuning in from Baltimore, let Keystone Corner know that you wanna have me there. I've been trying to get that to lock in for a while now. So let them know that she wants Cecily to come sing for you guys in Baltimore at Keystone Corner. I would love that.
Well, we have over 100,000 people listening into you right now, so I'm sure somebody will talk to them and get you in there. So yeah, let's talk about your band a little bit. Again, this I want people to understand all the different parts that you have to work with as an independent artist. It used to be where you had a record label, they provided you the musicians. They usually had studio musicians already lined up. But you've got to do all of this yourself. So how do you choose band members, and how do you choose the orchestration and instrumentation you want to support your voice and your lyrics?
Yeah, so I have several people that I've been performing with for a few years. And at this time, more than a few years. My guitarist, his name is Zachary Cutler. He lives in DC as well. And I've been working with him for almost 10 years now. And we've also written quite a few songs together that are on my last two projects and also the upcoming project. So he's always my go to for guitar. I think what's important is to find people who have the same influences as you, because then you don't have to explain as much. For instance, like, if I tell my, Drew, who played on the two songs that you played, who co-wrote and also played the keys on those songs, if I tell Drew like, "Oh, I want that Rhodes sound from that Gil Scott Heron song. I want that synth sound from that Gil Scott Heron song." He's gonna know. He might not even have to listen to it. He's gonna know what I'm talking about
Yeah,
because we
yeah,
both love Gil Scott Heron. So I think that's important. Finding people who, you can easily communicate with and who are pulling from the same places as you. And that's usually what I'm leaning towards. I mean, I don't always have the same band when I perform live. I don't have a set band who are always going to do my gig. So if I call someone and they're already booked for something else, then I have to find someone new. Um, and that's usually just through recommendations and other people I've seen play and I'm like, oh, they're kind of good. Let me, give their number for the future, that type of thing. But and then sometimes when I travel to different cities, I use bands from those areas. Like I played the Atlanta Jazz Festival this year and I played with a band that's based in Atlanta. Those situations are always nail biters because you come in, you don't have a lot of time, you have to rehearse and you do the gig. So those musicians have to be really strong. And so when you find good ones, you stick with them. You use them every time you come back.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I have some people that I've been blessed to really lock in with and play for years though, and that's always a beautiful thing. So I'm hoping that, eventually I have enough money to just tour with my own band all the time. That's what I'd love to do.
sure. When you go do a pickup band, when you go out of town, they could be well rehearsed, but it doesn't mean they can follow your lead. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
so
true.
so it is a nail biter. I understand what you're talking about. You're always wondering how it's going to come out the other end. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is tough. All right. So yeah, I wanted to just get a little idea about whether you use the same people in the studio when you do a local performance. Are you using your studio band mostly? When you perform in DC.
Yeah, so the people that are on the records are usually the same people I'm playing with live around here. Yeah, because they know what I like. They know the feel. I think for the most part, I have the same drummer on every song, Dante Pope, and same guitar player, Zachary Cutler, same keys player, Drew Kidd. So it sometimes depending on certain songs, I'll listen to it and I say, you know what? I think I want this drummer on it. I want this bass player because I know that they'll give it what that song needs. But the majority of the time, I'm playing with the same people I play with live in studio.
Yeah, I mean, this is another kind of question along the same line. How do you decide what instruments you want on a particular song? For
Right.
example, when would you bring in a flautist, for example? Um, yeah, how do you make those decisions? Is it I know for some musicians, I've had this discussion with Brian Culbertson. After the recording is done, he'll sit there and say, "Oh my God, I need to have this," and they'll just add a bass sax or some other instrument that was missing. So how do you
hmm
go about it?
Yeah, those things I usually will record the rhythm section. So for anyone who's not familiar with that, that's just bass, drums, guitar, keys. Um, and sometimes no guitar if certain songs don't need a guitar. So I usually record the rhythm section first and then I record my vocals and then I'll sit there and think, what does this need?
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. And some songs, like the one you just played, No Room for Fear, it needs strings, like if we're giving, love ballad, we
Hmm.
need the
Yep.
strings, and then you call the string arranger and set all that up. But then, certain songs I kind of have an idea beforehand, like with Clumsy, I knew very early on I wanted horns on that song. And so the arrangement for the final arrangement of the song was built with that in mind. Like we made the interlude between chorus one and the second verse longer because I knew that's where I wanted the horns to come in. Even though we hadn't finished the horn arrangement yet, I was like, no, 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 this has to be longer because I want that's the intro of the horns, and then from there they slowly build.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I think for me though, a lot of times it's like I said before, pulling from inspiration. So listening to other songs and picking apart what are the elements I really love here? Like I love this song, but what is it that I'm loving so much? And sometimes it's like, oh, the strings are perfect, or, oh, the drums are perfect. They're not giving too much or too little, and those are the things I pull from. So like for instance, on No Room for Fear, my drummer Dante Pope was like, how do you want me to play this? And I forget which song it was. I can't remember now, but it was some Isley Brothers song I played for him where the drums are simple, just in the groove, just simple. And he was like, "Oh, yes, got it." So yeah, I think that's it pulling from the different influences. It helps a lot in terms of communicating.
Yeah, it's the other part about this is it's never over till it's over. I've asked artists, how do you know when to let go of the song? I mean, You can keep changing it until it doesn't represent what you started with, and you took it too far. So
Mhm.
you have to know when to let go. It's also not. It's not an easy decision.
Yeah, it's not. And I've had people tell me, when you think you're done with a song, send it to some people you trust and have them listen and have them tell you if it needs anything. And I'll be honest, I never do that. Because it's hard for me to I don't know, when I feel a certain way about a song, it's hard for me to take in other opinions, honestly. So I think it's that fine line between being perfect and overwrought.
Yeah,
You want it to be
yeah,
perfect, but you can't sit on it forever. Eventually, you have to set it free out into the world.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes you can really, like we talked about, you can overproduce a song, and it's better left undone. So
Mhm,
it's a,
and
it's a
also, I
tough.
should say, in addition to listening to a song and figuring out what else does it need, you also have to listen and figure out what can we take away. Like, I learned
Yes.
that from, this book by, what's the guy from the Talking Heads? Brian Eno, I think his name is. He has a book he wrote, and I did exactly what he said to do on a lot of my songs. I'll listen to it, and I'll mute certain instruments. Like, I'll mute the guitar and then listen, or I'll mute the keys and then listen. And then you figure out, you know what? This section might not need it there. It sounds better if it comes in here or if it drops out here or that type of thing. So it's adding and subtracting that you have to do when you're trying to get the final version.
There's this wonderful story about Mozart and his competitor, Salieri. And after Mozart did a masterful symphony, Salieri greeted him in the back, and Mozart asked if he liked it. And Salieri said, "There are too many notes." And Mozart said, "Well, which ones would you like me to take out?" And the point is, you don't want to go to somebody else like you're talking about. It's your song, and a lot of artists do that. They'll ask other people's opinion, and it always struck me as you're losing control at that moment.
Hmm.
You know, so I understand where you're coming from on that. It's your music, so you want it
Mhm.
to sound like your music. So let's play the last song of the night. Okay, "Don't Hide from the Sun."
Yeah. So it's actually called Don't Hide the Sun.
I'm sorry.
No, no
Yes.
problem, no problem. Everyone does that. I'm like, maybe I should have just named it Don't Hide from the Sun because that's what everybody calls it.
I,
But
I even wrote it down that way.
I'm like, I left out a preposition maybe, but it's just called Don't Hide the Sun. And this one I co-wrote with a very good friend of mine who has honestly all my projects have a song that has been written and produced by him, Aaron Abernathy, who's also a brilliant artist in his own right. And this one, he just sent me, I just said, he really coached me through this particular album, Songs of Love and Freedom, which I put out in 2018. And he coached me through that album a lot. He kind of helped me figure out how it was going to come together. And he kept saying, I kept saying, no, I only have enough money to record a few songs. It's just going to be a short EP. And he was like, sis, if you want to do more songs, like the money will come. Just do what feels right. And so this was the last song that I recorded for the project. And it happened because I said, okay, well, let me see. Just send me some stuff you have and let me see what happens. So he sent me kind of just this, it was a really simple kind of loop of a keys part. And I think it has some drums on there and some other stuff. But I muted most of that. I just love the keys part, and I kinda just looped it and kept singing over top of it, and I had a poem I had written. So this song came together a little differently because I didn't come with the music and lyrics together. I got sent a track, and then I had a poem I had written, and I realized, like, "Oh, no, this feels like they fit together." So I kind of rearranged the poem into lyrics and gave it melody and we kind of changed the drums and added a new bass line, I think, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
And yeah, this is Don't Hide the Sun.
okay, let's hear it.
myself today, won't run from myself. Won't run from myself today, won't run from myself today, won't run from myself. Don't hide, sign. Feel so damn good on my face. Don't hide, the sun. Doesn't it feel so good just to be alive? Right here, right now, just to be alive. 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 Right now, just to be alive. Right here, right now, just to be
Love it. Love it. A quick question for you. Did you sing your own backgrounds on that song?
Yeah, I sing my own backgrounds on almost every song.
Everything? I thought so. Yeah, you see your own backgrounds. Okay, a couple of imagination questions, and before we wrap up tonight, if you could sing a duet with anyone from any period, any time, who would you want to sing a duet with?
That one's very easy. The answer is Luther Vandross.
Ah, okay. Why Luther?
Oh, I mean, come on. I always tell my voice students, like, once you get all the technical stuff down, even the emotion, I was like, the final little sprinkle is the finesse. And if you want to listen to a master of finesse,
Finesse. Yep.
it's Luther Vandross. Thank you. I don't know why all this week I've been listening to "If This World Were Mine" over and over again.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, that would be a dream come true if I could go back in time and do a duet with Luther Vandross.
Okay. My next imagination question: if you could be a fly on the wall and spend a day or two following around any artist today, who would that artist be?
Mm, that one is a little harder. Okay, so just because I'm a huge fan, I have to say Leanne LaHavis, because I would
Oh,
just kind of fangirl over her and just be very excited to just see her in real life kind of creating. Because I think the things that she comes up with guitar-wise and vocally, melodically, harmonically, so interesting, but so good. And it's hard to find that balance between being musically interesting and also good, because sometimes
yeah.
things can go, a little too out there. And so, yeah, I'd love to be a fly in the wall for her creative process.
Yeah. When I ask, I get some really interesting answers when I ask who would you want to do a duet with, for example. When I had Dwelle on the show, he said that he'd want to do it with Minnie Riperton, which shocked me. That shocked. I mean, what? Where did that come from? It's amazing what artists think about. I find it fascinating. You know,
Yeah, well, maybe I should reach out to Dwelle and see if he wants to do one with me.
yeah, you ought to think about doing that.
I ought
Exactly.
to do that, yeah.
Well, look, it's been wonderful having you on. For a kind of last question, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? Do you see yourself doing the same music, or do you see you going in a different direction? Have you ever had thoughts, I want to do a country, a country album or a gospel album? Have you ever, what's coming down the road in your career?
I think if I did anything, I might do a jazz album, like more of like a straight ahead situation, but Yeah, I don't see me going much further away than that. I think I'm doing right what I want to do, but it's hard to see the future. So I leave the options open. But as of right now, I just want to be performing and making money, performing and making music.
And making money.
Making money, yes. Making money, making music.
Yeah. Well, we broke the 150,000 listener mark tonight.
Oh,
We've had a
wonderful.
lot of people, listening
Thank you
in.
guys for
Uh,
tuning in.
yeah, yeah. Before you go, I really want to thank you for spending the time with everybody tonight. It's been a real pleasure, and your music is so wonderful. What would you like people to know about you as a final thought? What would you like them to take with them from you tonight?
Yeah, well, I want to thank you, Mel, for having me. I really appreciate it. And I think I'll just touch on what you kind of touched on earlier, which is joy. I think that and I also do guided meditations and breath work and that type of stuff as well. And I have a really good meditation on joy, but I just want to leave you with a little message on joy. There's no shame in joy. Find ways to touch joy in your life every single day. When there's something that's joyful in your life, nurture it, water it, have a childlike joy with no shame. Like it's a beautiful thing to have the wisdom of a grown up, but the joy of a child. So I don't know if that's necessarily about me, but I want to leave people with that. Like find the joy in your life and nurture it.
Wonderful, great thought for the close of the evening. And again, I do have one last question. You never use your last name. Do you want to share it with everybody, or do you want to just leave it at Cecily and call it a night?
No, I love my last name. My last name is Bumbray, which is uh actually I was telling my husband all about the history of my last name yesterday because I didn't change my name when I got married because I really love my last name. It's Bumbray, and I don't use it only because Cecily is hard enough for a lot of people.
Really?
Just to pronounce it and spell it correctly. So I was just when I was creating my stage name, I was like, let's just keep it simple.
Okay. Well, at least everybody knows your last name. I had to look for it. It took me a while to find it. But anyway, thank you so much. And I want to have you back, especially before you release your new LP coming out. So,
Yeah,
um,
thank you, thank you. And I
yeah,
wanna spell Cecily for anyone listening. It's Cecily. You can find me on Spotify, Apple Music, all those places under that Cecily, my first name. And if you wanna find me on Instagram, it's at Cecily Alexa, which is Cecily Alexa.
and if somebody wants to reach you to have you perform, who would they contact?
Yeah, so you can send me a DM on Instagram. That's always okay. And you can also reach me at my email address, which is cecilymusic@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much, Cecily, and we just love having you on. We love your music, and thank you for
Thank you.
giving us your time.
Thank you, Mel. I appreciate your time. Thank you for having me.